Good evening. Good evening. All right, for those of you who don't know, I'm Mayor Stefan Roots, Mayor of the City of Chester. Just good evening and welcome to the third in the Mayor's Lecture Series. We started this earlier this year, so once a month we're having a lecture, usually the first Tuesday of every month. So the first one we had, Professor John Caskey from Swarthmore, talking about Chester and its housing situation. Last month we had Dr. Toff, who talked about mental health and trauma. This month we were going to do landlord-tenant issues, especially focusing on landlords, renters insurance, having to show up with lawyers to court, but our renter insurance person dropped out at the last minute. So I thought it was perfectly timed to ask our receiver, since he was fresh off of a few announcements, to see if he'd be our guest at this third lecture series, and he agreed. So thank you, Receiver Doweary. You can clap, yeah, for that one person, because he surely didn't have to do it. So what are we here to talk about tonight, or what he's here to talk about, is Chester's plan of adjustment and some of the operational issues that are going on that he's discovered that we're working on here in the city of Chester. If you attend the MFRAC meetings, you've already seen these presentations, but for those of you who didn't, thank you and enjoy. Last week, the receiver for the city of Chester, Michael Doweary, filed a plan of adjustment in bankruptcy court. This plan represents the receiver's best path to move Chester out of bankruptcy and into financial sustainability. The full filing for the plan of adjustment is available on his website, the receiver's website, and he also publicly presented this plan via live stream, as I said, at the Municipal Financial Recovery Advisory Committee meeting. We call that MFRAC for short. And that's always reserved or preserved on the receiver's Facebook page. Is it anywhere else? YouTube. Over the past several decades, and especially in the last few years, a lot has happened in Chester's finances. That's no secret to anybody. It's often been very confusing to follow and very difficult to follow, whether we're talking about issues concerning the Chester Water Authority, Delcora, the Stormwater Authority, or even our own issues within City Hall. It gets very convoluted very fast. It's a lot of articles, a lot of information over a lot of years. One of the things that I'm encouraging everybody to do is that it's now that people can start locking in and seeing what's going to go on from this announcement of a plan of adjustment to the end, because everything kind of comes together in this big package. So that's why I invited Receiver Michael Doweary here tonight to share more about the plan of adjustment, for you guys to get to know what the operational issues are that we're facing here in city government. And in so doing, we're going to have some ground rules here. The receiver's plan of adjustment, it's a live and sensitive topic, isn't it, y'all? Give me a nod. Yeah. And there's a lot of stakeholders who's passionate about how Chester recovers from its financial distress. I see a lot of signs that say CWA. I think we need to come up with some Save the City of Chester signs to counter. All right, if you don't want to save the City of Chester, I understand. I just thought I'd throw that in. That's not part of the script. But we want to hear what you have to say. Everybody does. So let's listen respectively. At the end, there'll be some time for questions. We're only here till 7:30. Over on that wall at that table are some note cards and pens. We're going to do the questions and answers from the written notes. So we're going to get them together just to make sure we don't have 5 people asking the same question. They will be presented to the receiver at the end. Let me tell you a little bit about the person you're going to hear about, because that's what we do. Give a little bio for our lecture series speaker. His name again, Michael Doweary. He is a certified public accountant also known as a CPA. He's the founder of Dow Tax Service, helping hundreds of municipalities, nonprofits, and private clients in the United States and globally achieve their financial goals and start new businesses. Michael is a recognized municipal finance expert, an enrolled agent with the Internal Revenue Service, the highest tax designation recognition by the IRS, as well as a Sigma 6 certified. He also holds a master's degree in business administration. Michael was appointed by the state of Pennsylvania to serve as receiver for the city of Chester on June 22nd, 2020. For the past 4 years, Michael and his team has been working to address Chester's intricate and unique financial and infrastructure issues. Please join me in welcoming our receiver, Michael Doweary.
Good evening. Good evening. I want to thank everybody for coming out here. Give me 1 second to get this computer set up. Thank you, Mayor Roots, for having me to invite me to your lecture series, inviting me to your city. It's been a long 4 years to get to this point, but we still have much more work to do. What we did in federal court here recently was, I'll say, a move of transparency. There's no need for us to do what we have to do in secret. We need to engage the public around it. Now, everything that's going on in federal court, mediation, I can't disclose all those things. I'm bound by federal court with that. But as much as information that we can share publicly, we want to get that out. So as the mayor stated, I have 2 presentations here, 2 PowerPoints that are combined. They are our last 2 MFRAC presentations. So we're going to take 15 minutes or so and talk about the operational issues that we're addressing here in City Hall. And then we're going to switch into the plan of adjustment and a recent file. And as the mayor said, there will be time towards the end for question and answer. But we appreciate anyone who will sign up ahead of time, and we'll do our best to facilitate the questions that come in. So without further ado, maybe. Here we go. I don't want to read these slides word for word. If you want that, Vijay Kapoor, our Chief of Staff, does a much better job of that. But the essence here is to give you a timeline of what's taken place. Over the last year, since explaining what bankruptcy was about to the MFRAC committee and abroad, a lot of work has been happening at the federal level and here at the local level. We early on defined success as ensuring that Chester can financially and operationally provide an adequate level of vital and necessary services. And that's what makes Chapter 9 unique from other bankruptcy processes. Chapter 11, Chapter 13 is just liquidate, pay off the creditors, move on. Chapter 9 is about the continuing operation of the city. It is imperative that we establish a baseline level that it adequately meets the needs of the residents. Otherwise, we don't have a true plan. Balancing the equation, just revenues equal expenses, is not the hard part. It's really about trying to determine what is that adequate level and continuing the continuity of those operations for years to come. Monetizing an asset is a one-time thing. One-time monetization is not going to provide for the vital necessary services that are needed for years to come. So there are much more changes that are needed than just the monetization, but we'll address some of that here today. Success. The key components of that success are financial and operational, an adequate level of service, an ongoing basis, and in the best interest of the residents. Financial and operational. As I mentioned, it's not just about balancing the budget. For too many years, the city is try to go lean, cut to get to where we need to be. And you get to a point where services just don't meet the needs. And that's where, when I arrived here in 2020, that's where we were. And we're only marginally better than that at this time. There is still a significant investment that needs to be made into the workforce, the equipment, the capital infrastructure, et cetera. In January 29 of 2024, the PA Supreme Court affirmed our plan and it gave us some more broader powers to do what we needed to do. And since then, it's really helped to clearly establish a chain of command. Identifying the city's chief of staff, also known as the city administrator, as the top administrative position, and then all departments reporting back up through the chief of staff. Then that chief of staff reporting to the mayor and council. That streamlined structure, and I want to correct one thing from my bio, it's not Six Sigma that I'm certified in, it's lean operations. Very closely related to Six Sigma, but Six Sigma is the statistical side of it. Really looking at value streams and how we can most effectively deliver an operation in the most cost-effective way is the premise for my studies. Adequate. Over the last couple of years, we've taken on several studies to determine what is an adequate level of staffing, an adequate level, an appropriate org chart, what services are needed, how often does trash need to be picked up, for example, or parks cut, etc. Every aspect of the city operation is under consideration. Right now, the city is under a parking study, but we've already completed studies of the fire department, staffing levels in the police department, public works assessment, and also each city department has been assessed. And all of that is feeding into what we call the number. What does it take to adequately provide for those services for years to come? Now, unfortunately, because of federal court and federal mediation, I'm not allowed to share those projections with you in this manner. I can't wait to do so, though. Best interest of the residents. Financially struggling communities accept any new revenues they can get. And in years past, it really hasn't been taken into consideration what the impact has been to the city residents. I don't want to call out any particular industry offhand, but there is a significant trade-off between revenues that the city is seeing, or I shouldn't say a trade-off, a high correlation between the revenues that the city is seeing and some of the negative environmental factors that the city also has to deal with. Our hope is that these investments moving forward are sound and not just selling to the highest bidder, if you will, but really taking into consideration the health and welfare of the residents. Eliminating dependency on these revenues is important moving forward, on revenues that are compromising, if you will. To the operations. Internal operations, we talked about the Supreme Court decision and clarifying responsibilities. Here are some of the recent hires through these departments: a new CFO, HR director, who unfortunately just recently announced his resignation. If anyone knows of a qualified HR director, please send them our way. If it isn't up already, the city will have the posting up shortly. But you have sound leadership at the police commissioner, deputy fire commissioner, just recently promoted there. The city's current fire commissioner serving as the acting chief of staff. He's been a great pleasure to work with, JP Shirley. Public works director recently hired. Street supervisor is an internal promotion, Sean Drone. Parks and Rec director hopefully will be enacted upon by council here soon, Mr. Mark Alexander. Camille Hall serving as Community and Economic Development Director. Paul Fritz returning to the Chester area as Planning Director, and Judy Richards hired a year or two ago as Deputy Director of Inspections. In the police department, just recently the FOP agreed to change from 8-hour shifts to 12-hour shifts. What this change did was help the city to reduce overtime while also putting more officers on the streets. So we're very grateful to the FOP for making that change. However, it did come with a trade-off. We did eliminate the residency requirement. Chester has been struggling to hire and retain qualified police officers. Too often, police officers, cadets, are coming here for training, and as soon as they get the next opportunity at a neighboring municipality, they're out the door. So no sooner than we're hiring, we're losing them through the back door in attrition. So we had to make some changes. Eliminating the residency requirement. We do think there was a spike in the most recent round of applicants, but time will tell whether or not that was, what impact that is going to have. We've also purchased new patrol vehicles and also implemented body cameras. Still a significant investment is needed there, is that body camera footage. Stores takes up a significant amount of storage, so we need to invest in more computer hardware to process that footage. In the fire department is currently running at 12 firefighters per shift, which is up from 10 per shift where we started at the beginning of receivership. This is down though, however, from being at a high of 13 per shift earlier this year. We had to go back to the contractual requirement of 12 per shift because it was the only way to keep up with the cost. The overtime was just too fast, too much for the city to keep up with. Due to the SAFER grant, the number of budgeted positions, staff positions in the fire department have increased to 65 positions. However, that grant is expiring at the end of this year, so we're going to have to do some work to try to maintain that level. And I agree with the fire department's contract of 12 per shift. We'll see as we move through this plan of adjustment how we're able to maintain that. Completion of capital improvements to Fire Station 82. 81 is still in the plans, but ARPA funding, with this HVAC system going out and some other changes there, we're not sure exactly when we're going to be able to get to the Station 81 upgrades. New engine apparatus is scheduled to be delivered next year. I want to give a thank you to Representative Kazim and her help in securing grant funds for that engine apparatus, and the ladder truck is scheduled to be delivered in 2026. These two, an engine and a ladder, these two devices for the fire department are replacing equipment that are 25 and 30 years old, respectively, if I'm not mistaken. I'll double check those numbers. It's certainly from the 90s. Public Works and Parks. Last year, I believe it was last year, we did a deal with JP Mascaro to begin picking up bulk trash along with the regular trash collections. This did help for some time in reducing the amount of illegal dumping that we were seeing. However, that was short-lived. We still need a lot of help in this area, and the cameras, the additional service from Mascaro is just not enough. The city's Public Works Department is still picking up more trash than the trash collector. That trash that the department is picking up is just the illegal dumping, and it's more than what the trash collector is seeing on the routes. So we need a lot of help in this area to really crack down. New playground equipment in the parks, renovated the city pool, new street signs are going up as we speak, and also did a project in 2021, I believe, to replace and go to LED street lights. Those last two photos are just an example of what the Public Works Department is dealing with on a daily basis. Thank you to that team there and the direction and leadership of Andrew Heyman and all the work that they're doing. Parking. We have terminated the prior contract with the previous vendor. For however many years the city was involved in that engagement, they were never going to hit the revenue sharing triggers that were in the contract. We have selected a new operator, and I've also commenced a citywide parking study. So I expect some significant changes to the current program, but we are back with a new operator and currently working through soft enforcement, giving warnings to get people used to parking enforcement being ramped up again. Capital projects. One major thing that happened was cities had an internal staff, a city engineer, a one-man team, and he was, or a one-man army, so to speak, as they said. He certainly served the city well, but in removing that staff position and going with the contracted vendor, we've increased capacity significantly. Now that engineering firm is able to bring additional resources, call resources off the bench for the variety of projects that the city has to engage in, and it's really yielded great benefits for the city. We expect that level of efficiency to continue moving forward, but of course that level of service comes at a cost. What the relationship that we currently have in place is the expectation of all third-class cities. It's not common to provide that level of engineering service in-house for a city of this size. So contracting out and having the relationship that we have is the expectation, but we have to continue to be able to provide for that. Studies of the conditions of city bridges and roadways have been completed, and the capital plan is currently being put together. Now to the plan of adjustment of how we pay for it all. And then there's ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act. Very grateful to the federal government for granting the city $31.2 million. I mentioned a couple of the projects that have already been completed under capital, but in addition to that, we have the homeowner assistance program, and we have also been able to acquire a new location for the public works facility. Complete listing, more of a comprehensive update was provided by the city's former chief of staff at one of the July council meetings. But that information is readily available on spending year to date and what projects are all included in the ARPA program. Governance. The camera system in city council with council chambers been enabled the meetings to be live streamed and recorded. I want to thank the current administration doing a great job of getting the agendas out beforehand with more detail on what's going to be considered at council. Moves have been made to update the employee handbook. Thank you to the HR team and all involved there. And I should be careful, or if I haven't made that clear, these aren't items that just the receivers team has done on its own. This is working in partnership and conjunction with the city staff, who have been great to work with. You have people that have been committed to the city for all their entire life, and we are extremely grateful for their dedication. We are in the process of updating or producing, I should say, a citywide ethics policy, which is also required by the plan modification. To economic development. We've introduced a tax incentive program to encourage economic development here in the city. To date, we can verify with the department, but I'm pretty sure no businesses have applied for this program. But to anyone who's interested in residential or commercial development, there are tax incentive programs on the books to help ease the costs. Because the cost to renovate in the city can be much higher than it is to expand and move to a suburban location. So the concept of having an incentive program at a local level to spur that development is not uncommon. Hopefully these tax abatement programs will do just that. We recently completed a parcel condition survey. That's being combined with currently working through a market value analysis. As soon as those two pieces are done, we'll put that together with the city's comprehensive plan and develop what we would like to see developed as a neighborhood action plan. And that's really Mayor Roots and council and whomever going neighborhood by neighborhood and saying, here's what we have as an assessment. What do we want to see? Where do we want to see this neighborhood go? So we can't wait for that level of engagement to happen for the community and economic development. Working with the county on building condemnations. Another thank you to the county. They've been a great pleasure to work with and have committed more funds to the city to do, instead of just single parcel demolitions, to really look at a block by block, a more comprehensive program. So thank you for their support. And then we restructured this department to bring planning and zoning under one roof with permits and inspections with codes. So all community and economic development really should start with zoning. Once you have your zoning approvals and we know it meets the expectations of that neighborhood, then we can get into the specifics of the project and work on permitting. So that streamline or that value stream still has several kinks in it that need to be worked out, but we're moving in that direction of having one community and economic development department that encompasses all of those services. And then we have finance, HR, and IT. Previously mentioned hiring experienced leadership in each department. It's not a simple transition, and it takes time, so I just want to pause there for a second. City council members serving as department heads is not common for a third-class city. I don't know that any other third-class city, I'm pretty sure there aren't any other third-class cities in Pennsylvania that operated that way. It was great for the Supreme Court to come out with a decision, but then it takes months to now ramp up to where you need to be. And that's identifying 5 or 6 department heads to serve and lead departments where you haven't had that leadership before. So HR and everybody, all the leadership and the elected officials included, need to work together to establish that leadership and clear chain of command. We need experience. We need experience in each of these departments for that qualified leadership. Working on insurance savings, $400,000 found by the current CFO. The prior CFO identified another, I want to say $250,000 in interest that just the city didn't have its savings in a high yield account. So just simple changes being made that produce significant bottom line changes. Investing in the city's IT system. It's been widely reported to phishing scams, etc. Don't need to get into great detail about IT, but very soon, if not already, we can say that the city's eliminated every computer that was running on Windows 98 and versions that were just way too low. Unfortunately, I wasn't saying that as a joke. Literally up until last year, Windows 98 was still being employed here in the city. Continuously working on recruitment procedures for job applicants, simple things like making the cadet police officer application available online, fillable PDF, just simple changes that really help to recruit and bring the outside in, right, and recruit more individuals. There are a significant number of vacancies. Most are in the police department, but there are vacancies throughout every city department. And just one last point there on RFPs. There is now one dedicated person responsible for RFPs and getting those out. He started with a list of 35 that were on his desk. 3 weeks ago, that was down to 24. I want to say he's around 20 now that still need to go out. And that's in addition to the normal course of business. There's always a need to request and bring in qualified contractors, but we need to also work through that backend. I mentioned a few of these studies before, so I won't go through them all, but we're trying to examine every aspect of this operation. Crossing guards has been a significant one here, and the city just recently outsourced crossing guard management. Today was the first day of school. And I think today was the first day that the city, since I've been here, has been at full staff for crossing guards. Using a local third-party vendor, to really be out in the community and manage that operation. And they're also involved in other school districts. It really helped to bridge that gap. So hopefully we can maintain that level, and looking forward to good things there. Trash routes that RFP is out there now. We know that the current trash vendor contract expires at the end of next year. So we have about a year now to work through a study. What is the most effective way to pick up trash here in the city of Chester? I'll say a pet peeve of mine is currently every day in Chester is a trash day for some aspect of the city. You can never really look at it and say, here clearly is when on these 3 days or 4 days, nobody should have a can out in front of their house or in the back of their house. Right now, it's always something going on. So hopefully we can simplify that and find a more cost-effective way to pick up trash. All right, so that was it for operational items and what we've been working on. I'm going to take 2 seconds to grab a water. And then we'll jump right into playing with Justin. Just a quick reminder to folks that maybe have walked in late. There are note cards and pens over here on the side. If anyone has a question, please feel free to fill out a card. We're not going to have the time to go back and forth with a Q&A, but we will address the questions that are on the card as much as we can in the time that we have. All right, so shifting gears to the most recent infract and an update on bankruptcy. Last Monday, on August 26th, we filed a plan of adjustment in federal court that proposes a process to generate annual revenue for city services by monetizing Chester's water, sewer, and stormwater assets while keeping them in public hands. I'm going to read this line for line because these points are critical. This plan filing comes after 30 years of state oversight, but it's a critical first step in the plan of adjustment process, and we'll dig into that a little more. So we will explain what is included in the plan of adjustment as well as what is not, and why we filed this and the expected next steps. Donald Ricano, this PowerPoint, we'll make it available. It's available on my website and Facebook. But Donald and Ricano, I want to point out, they are the repository for all things bankruptcy related. The bankruptcy process requires the debtor to utilize an administrator to keep track of all those documents. So if a retiree is looking for a document, a filing, whatever, anything that you're looking for, they're available on the Donald and Ricano site. We don't need to go into all of these dates, but appointed as receiver in June of 2020, bankruptcy filing in November of 22. From about January or February of 23 through present day, we are actively mediating with all parties in the bankruptcy process. That includes CWA and Delcora, and we expect those mediations to continue. Nothing about what we filed last week is to interrupt that process, but at the same time, we need to acknowledge that unlike the other parties involved in this, the city of Chester is the one that's running out of time. The city of Chester is the one that's facing a fiscal cliff, the expiration of grant funds, and the need to pivot and move forward. So we are moving with a sense of urgency, I'll put it that way. Monetization is not the only item in this plan of adjustment. We also address secured debt and unsecured debt. In November of 22, November of 23, Judge Chan, the federal judge assigned to this case, issued a decision in favor of the city regarding secured debt. Don't need to name them directly, but what I'll say is that the bonds that the city has outstanding, there was a question of whether or not they were secured by city assets or unsecured. And the judge at that time deemed that that debt was unsecured. So since then, we've taken a pretty strong position. In 24, we have not paid that debt service, and we do not plan to pay it moving forward. This debt was issued at a very high interest rate. In my mind, it was predatory lending. The city should not have taken out this debt in 2017, probably should have filed bankruptcy at that time. It amounted to what was a payday loan. And what's been paid back already in interest and principal repayments has been very significant. So I'm comfortable with the position that the city is taking moving forward. We mentioned the Supreme Court decision in the last part of the presentation, and then most recently in August, we filed the plan of adjustment. So what is a plan of adjustment? It is a document that provides for the treatment of creditors' claims against the debtor. Here, the city of Chester is the debtor, and groups such as retirees, city unions, bondholders, and others are creditors. Similar to a recovery plan under Act 47, bankruptcy provides the city with additional rights and powers. I'll pause there for a second to say monetizing assets is not new. Chester would not be the first to consider monetization by far, but also that conversation isn't new to the city of Chester. What's different from the prior administration to where we are here today is that monetizing alone is not enough. If the city just monetized the asset and did not make any operational changes or address legacy costs, it would be money in, money out. We'd be right back in the same position without the asset within a matter of years. I think the estimate that we had for the prior proposals that were received after satisfying debt service and at the rate of the operational losses each year, the city would have spent that money within 7 to 8 years. So we have to go through a bankruptcy process. We have to go through a restructuring to protect those investments, if you will, but to provide a significant runway for the city to also raise its tax base through community and economic development. The two have to come together. This plan is filed with the bankruptcy court, must be confirmed by the bankruptcy court before becoming effective. So here it is important to note that what we filed isn't indicating that we intend to do an RFP. That isn't the acceptance or rejection. That filing is letting the bankruptcy court and all parties involved, letting them know what is going on. The approval, if there is to be, well, when there is one, will happen probably at least a year from now. And I should probably note here that through the adoption or the approval of that plan of adjustment, the federal courts will facilitate a public hearing process. The public will have the opportunity for its voice to be heard and weigh in on the plan of adjustment with the federal courts. So, not the public hearing for tonight. We just want to explain what's going on and what actions have been taken. There will be ample time for the public to weigh in formally on the plan of adjustment. A plan can be amended or supplemented. And as I mentioned earlier, we will continue mediations in the hopes of reaching agreements with all parties. As we will discuss later, this plan focuses on a process to monetize Chester's water, stormwater, and sewer assets. A process that must be started now and does not address issues relating to retirees or the city's unions. Again, this plan is available online. It specifically calls out retirees and unions and saying that will be addressed at a later date. Basically, we have to understand the revenue side and what kind of money we're working with before we really can have meaningful conversations with retirees. We've been clear that the Chester must monetize, but certain statements were made in this filing that we want to dig into further. So why does Chester need to monetize? As I mentioned, the current tax base cannot support basic city operations. Chester already has one of the highest real estate tax rates in the Commonwealth, also has one of the highest earned income tax rates in the Commonwealth, and highest stormwater rates in the Commonwealth. Raising rates, we can't tax our way out of this. That's just a vicious cycle. The more you raise rates, the more people leave, the more you gotta raise on who's remaining. That cycle has been tried, it doesn't work.
Raising rates is taxing through tax.
Continuing on. Chester's pension and retiree health care costs are unsustainable. We've gotten to a point where Chester cannot afford these legacy costs. That's clear in the actuarial studies. A 7% funding level is unheard of in any pension plan. Without monetization, Chester would need to make extreme cuts to retiree benefit levels and city services. Chester's water, sewer, and stormwater assets are very valuable and are the only substantial assets that it can monetize. However, monetization does not mean privatization. And even with monetization, Chester still must reduce its retiree benefit expenses and make other financial and operational changes. Thus, monetization is not only necessary, but it's not sufficient alone for Chester to be financially and operationally successful. So, to the pension plans and retiree health care costs. The city owes $39.7 million in past due receivables to the pension plan. This is not the same as the unfunded liability. These are past due MMO payments. It was mentioned at the last city council meeting that the city passed an illegal budget, that it was a $2 million deficit. Technically, there was a $42 million deficit. That's why the city is in bankruptcy. We cannot afford the operational expenses. So it's not a surprise. This isn't the first year that the city was not able to balance a budget. In fact, it's been quite some time since the city was able to balance a budget beyond just something that's on paper. I'm talking about actual performance. And if you look at the 2023 budget, it clearly reflected the $39.7 million, the $40 million receivable that for some reason, as the budget this year was prepared internally, it did not include that line item, but it's there. The actuarial studies all have it. And what's important about that is that the city's pension plan payments moving forward, the MMO payments, as the city controller just introduced to the council last week, those MMO payments assume that this $40 million is already in the plan. So it's really not just what Ms. Taylor presented last week, it's what she presented last week, plus this $40 million. So we gotta figure out how to overcome that hurdle. Again, worst funded in Pennsylvania and certainly considered severely distressed. As far as the lopsided nature of this, it's like the city has two of every department. Two police forces, one active and one retired, two fire departments. The city currently pays more for retiree health care costs than it does for the actives. Beginning in 2021, we've ensured that the MMO contributions have fully been made, but we have not been able to pay down that $40 million past due amount. When we started in June of 2020, the police plan had $1.28 million in it. It currently has just over $13 million. Significant improvements that are going in the right direction, but that there, $13 million has it at 7% funded. So that gives you an idea of the 150, 160 or so million that's supposed to be in that plan. So if you back out that receivable, this is what that shows. I'll just skip to the last column. 7% funded, fire 50%, everyone else 34%, for a roundabout average of just under 24%. Anything under 70% is considered distressed, and the city is currently at 23% funded. So significant actions need to be taken. These next couple slides give you some context comparing the city's liability to other communities. It's hard to look at an unfunded liability as a raw figure. To give you a kind of an apples to apples comparison, per capita is used so that you can equate one city to the next. So $82 million unfunded liability is the second highest among third-class cities. If you look at it a different way, based on population, Chester by far has the most significant liability. And this $2,500 per person assumes that that $40 million is in the plan. If it weren't, the liability would be over $3,500 per person. So again, you see the difference there. And why do the actuaries include $40 million, the receivable? It's not uncommon, you want to get your payments in by December 31st. You might miss the 31st because of a postmark or just transmission. It may not post until the 4th or the 5th of the following month. So it's not uncommon for actuaries to factor in a receivable. But at this point, the receivable is getting to a point where there's no way Chester can make up that liability. It's not just one payment that is missed. These are years of payments that have added up to that $40 million. And as bad as the city's pension funding is, the retiree health care is that much worse. Plans are rich and expensive and need to be adjusted, unfortunately. Some steps have been taken through the 2017 labor contract negotiations to bring down the cost of new retirees, but unfortunately that may be too little too late. This describes the plan. We don't need to get into that detail here tonight. Again, I will show that Chester is very high in its OPEB liability. OPEB standing for other post-employment benefits, namely retiree health care. And then if you look at that same figure on a per capita or per person basis, you see how high that is. 4,900 compared to the almost double the next closest municipality. I mentioned the disparity of paying more for retiree health care costs than actives. And this slide further illustrates that. Total spent on actives is just over $3.3 million. Total spend on retirees is $5.8 million. So it's not even close. So what is in the plan of adjustment? The key objective of this plan is to propose a process to generate annual revenues to pay the city's obligations, including city services, by monetizing while keeping them in public hands. Critical point. Under the plan, the city of Chester will seek a request for proposals from third parties to acquire, manage, and operate the assets of the Chester Water Authority, the Chester Stormwater Authority, and the Chester's reversionary interest in the sewer assets in Delcora, with the requirement that all assets remain publicly owned. The RFP process will be directed by my team and pursuant to the authority placed under Act 47. And as we mentioned, we don't need the bankruptcy judge's approval to issue the RFP. But as the proposals come in and we evaluate what to do next, all of that certainly will feed into a plan of adjustment, and that will need to be approved by the bankruptcy judge. And I should mention that all proceedings for the bankruptcy process are open to the public, whether they're virtually or in person, but they are in the Philadelphia courthouse. Considerations. First one is that the assets must remain publicly owned. Special consideration will be given to public authorities or other public entities interested in a merger or other combination. In essence, regionalization doesn't need to bring in another party. The parties right now currently at the table can figure this out, but we need to move faster. We need to move with some with haste to get to where we need to be. We need to move quickly. Under regionalization, an entity or authority is created by municipalities or other public entities joining together to provide services with the entity, the authority remaining publicly owned. This excerpt is from a WHYY article. There are some interesting quotes in this article. I would encourage folks to take a look at that. Quotes from local parties. To the RFP process. Applicants will be encouraged to provide proposals that minimize the impact on future rates and ratepayers, particularly those within the city limits. Retain all public sector jobs. No jobs should be impacted, will be impacted through this process. Provide a regional approach to stormwater management with the ability to potentially manage the stormwater requirements of other communities who voluntarily agree to participate. MS4 requirements, NPDES permits, etc. These requirements aren't going anywhere, and they're faced by every municipality, especially those with combined sewer systems. include a proposed governance structure that is fair to ratepayers served by the entity. And it is our goal that this process will begin in the near future and that the transaction will be approved as a part of the bankruptcy court confirmation process. This RFP still needs to be drafted. Our team is starting to meet internally to work on that. But we are some time away, probably a month away from this RFP being ready. So what does the filing mean for city vendors? In order to ensure that the city is able to pay its debts, provide vital and necessary services to residents, and avoid disruptions caused by the bankruptcy case, the city intends to pay trade vendors and service providers in the ordinary course of business, so long as there aren't any disputes. So business has to continue. Service operations have to improve. And since the bankruptcy filing, the city has continued to pay these vendors in the ordinary course. If any vendors have a question, feel free to reach out to our office at info@chesterreceivership.com. So what happens next? As I mentioned, we will begin to prepare the RFP. We will continue to mediate with the parties in the mediation in the hopes that we can reach an agreement. The best outcome here is a consensual resolution from the parties that are currently at the table. But I need to take this step to keep the process moving forward. We cannot wait indefinitely for an agreement that may or may not happen through the mediation process. The city has to control its own fate and take that and take control of that situation. So the process moving forward is a timely consensual, just in case we cannot reach a consensual resolution in a timely manner. The city will continue to pay undisputed claims. And that's that for the presentation on the plan of adjustment. And I'll mention one other part about the secured or unsecured debt. Currently, the city is saving about $3.5 million by not paying that debt service. So hopefully the judge continues to rule in our favor and we do not need to return to that, but that's certainly making a difference. I think at this time, I'll turn it over to Mayor Roots for the adjustment.
Thank you, Receiver Doweary. I have in my hand all the questions that were put on the cards. We're going to try to go through many of these as fast as we can. I tried to put them in a logical order and pertaining to the subject. Does the plan of adjustment propose 3 separate requests for proposals? One for Chester Water Authority, one for Delcor, one for the Stormwater Authority?
One RFP.
For your PowerPoints, do you have a written copy? And if so, can they have one?
I don't have any printed copies with me here tonight. Both presentations are available on our website. If you reach out, send an email, I'll reply back with a copy of the presentation.
Have you met with Detroit or other communities that have come out of bankruptcy without selling their water assets?
Excuse me,
We have.
we couldn't hear the answer to the first question.
To the first question, there will be one RFP for all 3 systems. One RFP. To the last question, have we met with other municipalities? Yes. We've met with other municipalities, Detroit in particular. I've met with Kevin Orr, their receiver, as well as Pittsburgh officials, others who have avoided bankruptcy and learned from some of the steps that they've taken to either emerge from Act 47 or to avoid bankruptcy.
When will the RFP be made available and who can apply?
The RFP will be open to all parties, and we expect to have it ready within about a month.
When did Chester Water Authority become a city asset?
When did it stop being a city asset? Chester started the water authority. Chester started the water authority, and the system was never acquired by any other municipality.
Why do you not trust the Pennsylvania court system to decide who can dissolve Chester Water Authority? You went around to the federal courts.
The Supreme Court case is still pending, and it may go that route. Again, we hope that we can reach a consensual resolution, but that case hasn't gone anywhere. It was stayed by the bankruptcy process. As I said before, monetization by itself was not going to provide what the city needed. We needed a comprehensive plan to address all aspects, not just the revenue side, but the expense side. So there was a need to put a pause on that proceeding to have it align with what's going on, everything else that's going through the bankruptcy process.
I'm sorry, that last question, when did CW become a city asset? What was your answer? You said it's not a city asset?
I did not say that.
What did you say? That's why I'm asking.
Chester started the water authority, and it never stopped being
So
a
it is a
city.
city asset?
Yes.
Where can we find the proven studies on how monetization will work? Trial and error has proven it has failed the city, residents, and surrounding boroughs and town.
I don't think that's a true statement. Where we can find where it's worked, I think the best example right now would be Capital Region Water. As Harrisburg was going through Act 47 and actually filed for bankruptcy, they didn't go through the bankruptcy process, but they did file. The Harrisburg Water was spun off as an independent regional authority. So Capital Region Water services the city of Harrisburg and the surrounding municipalities. That one authority provides water, wastewater, and stormwater services, and they're doing well. The rates are competitive, they're not out of line, and it's publicly owned. They're not under pressure to raise rates for ratepayer or shareholders,
Does
etc.
it pay Harrisburg?
Capital Region Water is an example of a system, how did you say that, where a municipality is going through this process and where has monetization worked. I'm speaking to the service side of it, but cities going through monetization to help restructure the city, that's not uncommon.
In my effort to lump all the similar questions together, this might be the same question, and you may have answered it. Is there another city that has gone through the process of monetization? Who? How long? And the current status? Any change to your question?
Yeah.
Have you talked with Delco and state regarding regional services to better serve the city?
Yes, we have, and those conversations are all going. We're always in conversations, and I'll give you an example. I only spoke to the shift change with the police department. The county also stepped up and provided, through New York Park Police, turnkey and they staffed 2 city positions. I can't remember offhand, but getting more officers out on the street is not just a concern of the city of Chester. The county district attorney's office really takes a serious interest in that and has been very helpful in providing additional services. So regionalization, so to speak, is happening with every aspect, or I should say we're open to the conversation with every aspect of city operations. And as we move through that process, that's another example where city jobs and everything were jeopardized by that, but we were able to improve an operation and provide better services for the residents.
What assurances have been provided in writing that the sale of CWA will not lead to a sale to a private buyer in the near future? Or is this proposed at all?
We're not proposing selling to a private buyer, but what guarantees have been put in writing? I don't think any that guarantee can happen. Through the bankruptcy process, the city is required, a debtor is required to value its assets and bring them to the table. So the city has to go through this. I don't think the restriction, just an outright restriction of what we won't do, I don't think that will be approved by the courts. So we're going to put into this RFP what we want, and we're going to pursue what we want. But I don't think we're in a position to tell the bankruptcy court what we will and will not do.
How are ratepayers protected in a public-private partnership? They're not regulated by the PUC.
Much like they are protected now, where the entities they represent, the municipalities, control the boards and control the rate setting process. So whether it be the PUC, state regulation, or regulation at the local level, that oversight will need to continue.
Why should ratepayers of CWA rates increase to cover the debts of Chester? I'm trying to read these. Why should ratepayers of CWA pay increased rates to cover the debts of Chester and 29 years of DCED failure?
Well, first I'll say that we're certainly sensitive to rates and affordability. With that said, we're going to go through this process with that front and center. It's kind of back to what I was saying about real estate taxes. It makes no point to monetize the system to bring money in if you price rates to a point where nobody can afford the water anymore. It's not a circular equation, but it's certainly related. And we have to be mindful of that balance. There's so much more to that. What I would say with the 30 years of oversight from DCED, for 30 years, DCED was providing consultants. It was to the local level of what will or not be followed. They were just consultants. Receivership started in 2020, so it's not 29 years of receivership, it's only 4 years of receivership. But it's 30 years of the state trying to intervene, giving recommendations on best practices, completing studies, providing grants, etc. But the autonomy still was held here locally, and decision making was still locally, those decisions were still locally made.
How can you explain that rates will stay low if a third-party operator is providing Chester with an upfront payment and annual payments? That money will have to come from ratepayers.
Yeah.
How can you promise that it will stay public?
That's because that's how we're going to draft the RFP.
Yeah, but you can't even have.
We're going to, right, they don't even know what we're going to get back when we put the RFP out. So to the question, whether rates will stay low. What I can say is that that's what we're going after. We have to evaluate the proposals that come in and figure out a plan of adjustment that works for the city of Chester. I cannot make any guarantees to you that.
Then why do you keep saying it's going to stay public?
Sir, please.
Just ask.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Again, I'll answer the question again. That's how we're drafting the RFP. That's what we want. We'll see what we get back and we'll evaluate it at that time. But I can't make any guarantees of what this will look like in the future. Right now, we're going out for requests. We're telling the public that we want this to remain in public hands, and we'll see what the bidders come back with. But until we get,
it's going to remain in public hands.
please continue.
Why not incorporate, got a couple pension questions. Why not incorporate the pensions with police and fire retirees into the state pension plan to relieve pressure on Chester's finances?
The goal there is state administration of the plans. So we will be pursuing PSERS to administer Chester's pension plans. But we cannot, I doubt that Harrisburg will bail out the pension plans, I think, which is what that question is really getting at. But we are targeting getting the pension plans up to a funding level where they're accepted by the state to pull into the PSERS system, and then they will administer the plans moving forward.
Similar but not the same. How do we know selling CWA is going to solve the police pension crisis? Are we trading one pension for another? CWA loses these pensions.
It's the point of adjustment, right? So how do we know selling CWA is going to solve the police pension crisis? We don't know that. We know that we need to monetize and bring additional revenue in. Until we get these pieces together, have them all on the table, and figure out how the pieces work together, we don't have a plan of adjustment. So I can't speak definitively to what it's going to be, what rates are going to be. We're just not to that point yet. Right now, we're being open and upfront with the public that an RFP is going out. Until we get those proposals back, we don't know where we are.
If the plan is approved, the plan that hasn't been completed yet, and the CWA were dissolved, who would assume control over CWA, employees, and assets?
We can't answer that question at this time.
You can't answer nothing.
Will you promise to not sell CWA in writing?
No.
This one person really got it in. 5 questions on 1 card. And we're doing really good on time, so you okay? All right. What does publicly owned entail versus a publicly traded company?
Publicly owned, by that we mean a government entity or quasi-government entity. Publicly traded is just a private company that sells shares publicly. Two totally different things. When we're referring to publicly owned, we mean government or quasi-government entity. So either a municipality owning it outright or an authority.
What assurances can be made to protect rates?
None at this time.
What CWA positions will be retained? For example, staff to leadership.
All positions will be retained.
Give me a second to go through these. These weren't particularly.
Governance will need to be figured out. There are no intentions to dissolve the CWA board.
It's in the file.
You just said that.
It's in the file.
Yeah, you said it. It's all over.
Never mind.
Sell the CWA, the city of Chester will be rich. I didn't make that up. What's the difference between CWA and any other corporation operating in Chester?
You're not taking any other people.
Chester doesn't own any other corporation.
Okay, no.
Well, won't you just tax them?
Which entities will vote on this plan?
The plan will have to be approved by the federal courts, so it'll be Judge Chan making that decision.
Why are the unions that represent CWA not treated as partners?
I'm not sure what that means. Currently, we are meeting with CWA leadership, board, and their council to work through the mediation. So I don't think that's a question for us. That's a question for CWA leadership.
Those were all the questions related to the plan of adjustment. These final questions relate to operations of the city. You want to take those as well?
Mayor, excuse me, you didn't read it back to the floor. You read one form, you didn't read it back to the floor.
I didn't read everything that's in front of me.
Well, you didn't read the question.
How can we afford to hire inexperienced officers at $70,000 per year as a new hire with little or no experience?
Chester's pay rates are, if I'm not mistaken, below market, so we probably need to be even higher than that.
There was no address to the historic assets of the city. Tourism could be a revenue stream.
Tourism, yeah, certainly can be, it should be a revenue stream. Community and economic development has to be a part of this moving forward. There are efforts from our team members in the city combined to promote community and economic development and make it a warm and welcoming place to come in and do business. So tourism has to be a component of that. As far as addressing city operations, we're looking at the Department of Community and Economic Development and how can that department better serve the community. But as to going out and entertaining companies that I guess provide that kind of service, we're not involved in those conversations.
Should you have held this public meeting before petitioning the courts in order to get input from the constituents? Why did you not do this? Is City Council in agreement with this plan of adjustment?
I can address the first part of that. Public meetings are ongoing, but as we take file in federal court, we can't always disclose that ahead of time to the general public. So there are going to be steps taken in federal court that I'll have to come back after the fact and explain what just happened. But public meetings will continue. They have been, and will continue. Please reach out to my office and we'll schedule any group sessions or individual one-on-one sessions where we can do a deeper dive. That's the legal process.
All right, is City Council in agreement with the plan of adjustment? As we see, this is just an introduction that a plan of adjustment has been put forward to the courts. It's empty, it's blank, there's nothing there. So it's a little tough to agree to something, but I will say that this move proves that we're getting closer to the end of bankruptcy. So in that sense, yeah, we're really thrilled that we finally gotten to a plan that's going to get us out of bankruptcy. What have you actually implemented to reduce debt and change operational services, besides the list that you presented?
In addition to or besides that list, we can do a deeper dive there. We actually have a list of about 150 initiatives that have been accomplished since we've been here, but it's way too much to have in that side of the presentation.
All right, we got 3 left. One of them's on residential parking, one's on taxes by apartment owners, and the last one's on the exit off of Route 95 on Colonel Street. I'm pretty sure they mean the entrance. It's cleaned at least once a week, and it's dirty again the next day. What about putting cameras? I'm having trouble reading the rest, but everybody knows that's a big concern. The trash that's on the entrance to I-95 going south. Do you have anything to say on that?
I'll continue to relay the concerns to District 6, is it a PennDOT? And they've been supportive of prior projects, along 291, et cetera. But that is a state grant, and the state should be supportive of that. I'll relay the concerns and see what can be done.
And just so people know, we've tried to get local organizations, and I've seen people try to even get children out there. Super dangerous. So that's PennDOT, and that's who he's speaking of, Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. How much taxes are owed by apartment owners, and has there been any effort to lien their properties? People are the losers on more than one front by losing CWA as an asset, and we will be paying more for less quality water.
I can address how much taxes are owed by apartment owners. I don't have a figure off the top. I assume we're talking about real estate taxes here. One thing that the city has been working on over the last year is to create a directory, a list, a comprehensive list of all non-owner occupied units here in the city of Chester. So we're working towards that identification, but to be able to say how much they owe in taxes, I couldn't answer in this capacity. To placing liens on their properties, whether it be for refuse or real estate tax, the city really hasn't done that for refuse. For real estate tax, the county takes over that process and addresses back taxes through its upset sales auctions. So that part is addressed. The city is currently in conversations with a collection agency that does have the ability to lien properties. Actually, some action is going to be, or wording is going to be coming before council for consideration of whether or not to enable that. And an example is the Prospect Crozier bankruptcy. And currently, the medical system owes the city over $100,000 in real estate taxes. It owes the school district, I want to say $1 million, I can't quote the exact number. But right now, the city doesn't have an ability to lien that entity to protect that interest, that debt, that receivable. So we need the city to take action to enable the ability to lien, but we also want to be mindful of an elderly resident who doesn't have the means to pay, and we don't want to be too aggressive in using a sledgehammer across the board. So that language is currently under consideration, or being developed, I should say, and hopefully soon will be brought before mayor and council for consideration.
The Public Works Director, the new Public Works Director is working on a property maintenance plan, and it will address some of those issues.
All right, we're going to switch gears and talk about parking, residential parking. Somebody feels as though it discriminates, only affects certain areas of the city, and why. And they find that residential parking is too invasive. They must live near the Chester Crozier Medical Center, and says staffing is down 40%, no longer poses a problem. A little earlier, you said that the new parking management company is going to do a study on parking, which will probably adjust the rules in which they're following now, but I'm going to let you answer that again.
Yeah, nothing really more to add. The current vendor is just now kicking off the study. I expect there to be different recommendations on these zones and rates, et cetera, moving forward. But right now, the first step was just to bring back the old parking program and get something going. And the concept was that you need something to study. So it was, without having something on the books and something up and running, the third party coming in to study it, what is it that what they would be looking at and evaluating the successes and failures. So that type of feedback is necessary, and hopefully that kind of settlement, those feelings will be expressed in the study and appropriately captured.
There's the final question. If a private or shareholder-owned public company were to buy any of the three authorities, how could the governance structure work to keep the ownership of the authority in public hands?
So the RFP we're going out right now at this point will not open this up to private ownership. We are going out looking for entities that are interested in operating a publicly owned utility. That could be an owner-operator, it could be a lease, it could be a public-private partnership. But this is not, this RFP that's going out will not will not transition these entities into a private company. So we'll see what the responses are, we'll see what we get, and we'll go from there. But the first solicitation is not for private ownership.
In all fairness, in the interest of time, well, we went through all the questions. Whoever submitted this one though, the typed one, that was you?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
You went through.
Listen. We're gonna answer all these. I'll get the answer back to you. We just don't have the time to go through the other 6 that are on here. All right. Let's see. We're gonna close this out. Thank you so much for joining us. This was the Mayor's Lecture Series. All right. I want to thank all of you who came out. I want to thank all of your attentiveness. I want to thank you for the great questions. I, again, Mayor of Chester, Stefan Roots, my number one focus is what? Chester. I am focused on Chester. My interest, my work every day is all about Chester, saving Chester. His role as receiver works at the federal and state level. For any issues that are dealing locally, you will talk to myself and council. Submit any other questions you have to the receiver's website. He has his bi-weekly MFRAC meetings that you can see on Facebook. And there will be public hearings for those of you who want to continue this conversation or to be in an official hearing, which this was not, as time goes on. And I promise you, we will be making some Save Chester City signs. So thank you guys and have a good night.